I knew something was wrong the moment he smiled at me, not because the smile was unfriendly. It was the opposite. It was too warm, too practiced, too wide. The kind of smile that fills the whole face but never quite reaches the eyes. My daughter had been seeing him for 4 months at that point, and every time he came through my front door in Kelowna, he gave me that smile. And every time, something small and quiet in my chest said, "Pay attention. I am 63 years old. I have buried a husband, raised a daughter, mostly on my own for the last 11 years, and managed a portfolio of 6 rental properties across the Okanagan that my late husband Terrence and I spent 30 years building together. I know how to read people. I spent 22 years as a school principal in the same district. You learn, doing that job, to see through the performance. Children perform, parents perform, teachers perform. And eventually, you develop a kind of internal alarm, quiet, never screaming, that goes off when someone is showing you a version of themselves rather than the thing itself. His name was Callum. He was 41 years old, soft-spoken, well-dressed in that careful way that isn't quite expensive but wants to suggest it. He worked in financial consulting, he said. Independent, his own small firm. He'd met my daughter at a friend's barbecue in the summer, and she'd called me that same night, and I could hear in her voice that something had shifted. My daughter is 34. Her name is Nora. She'd had 2 serious relationships before this one, both of them decent men who simply weren't right for her, and she'd been on her own for almost 3 years before she met Callum. She wasn't lonely in the desperate sense. She had her work, her friends, a life she'd built carefully and well. But she was ready. I knew she was ready. And Callum seemed to understand that about her, seemed to meet her exactly where she was. I wanted to be wrong about him. I tried to be wrong about him. The first time he asked about the properties, it was a Sunday afternoon in September. Nora had gone upstairs to get a sweater, and Callum and I were alone on the back deck, looking out at the lake. It was still warm the way Kelowna gets in September, that particular golden warmth that makes you want to stay outside past when you should. And I had just set down 2 glasses of iced tea and was about to sit when he said, almost casually, "How many of the units are still rented out?" I looked at him. "I'm sorry? Nora mentioned you have rental properties," he said. He had his hands wrapped around his glass, and he was looking at the water, not at me. "Just curious how that works, managing them yourself." I imagine it's a lot to handle. I told him it was manageable. I thanked him for his concern. I didn't answer the question about how many units. I told myself it was small talk. He worked in finance. People in finance think about assets the way other people think about weather, casually, constantly, without meaning anything particular by it. I did not mention it to Nora. By December, they were talking about moving in together. By February, he had proposed. It was Valentine's Day, which I found faintly theatrical, but Nora was happy in a way I hadn't seen in years, genuinely, deeply happy. And so I pushed the small, quiet thing in my chest down further, and I focused on her face, and I said everything a mother is supposed to say. He proposed at the restaurant, where they had their first official date. He'd called the chef ahead of time, had her favorite dessert brought out with the ring resting against the plate. Nora told me later that it was the most thoughtful thing anyone had ever done for her. She showed me the ring over video call, holding it up to the camera. Her cheeks flushed, and I told her it was beautiful. It was. I just kept thinking about the question on the deck. In March, he asked again. We were at my kitchen table this time, the 3 of us, going through takeout from the Thai place on Bernard Ave that Nora has loved since university. He was talking about the market, the Kelowna real estate market specifically, how it had leveled off from the peak, how it might be a good moment to think about whether holding multiple properties long-term still made sense. Of course it makes sense, I said. It's been our family's retirement plan for 30 years. Right, of course, he said. He nodded the way people nod when they want you to think they're agreeing, while they're actually just waiting to make the same point again. I just wonder sometimes if the management overhead is worth it at this stage. There are investment structures that could simplify things considerably. I'm not looking to simplify, I said. Nora looked between us. She changed the subject. That night, After she'd fallen asleep in the guest room and Callum had gone back to his apartment, I sat at my kitchen table for a long time with a cup of chamomile tea, and I thought about what I knew and what I didn't know. What I knew, he had asked about my properties twice now, unprompted, in ways that were framed as concern or curiosity but were pointed in the same direction. What I didn't know, whether I was reading something into nothing or reading something into something real. I called my accountant the next morning. Old friend, semi-retired now, and someone Terrence and I had trusted completely for 20 years. I asked him, without going into everything, what rights a spouse or common-law partner might have to property held in your name under BC law, just to understand the landscape. He explained it carefully. He told me the property owned before the relationship is generally separate property under the Family Law Act here in British Columbia, but that increases in value during the relationship can sometimes be subject to division. He told me that the specific structure matters, how titles are held, whether anything is commingled, whether any property is transferred or refinanced during the relationship. "Why are you asking?" he said. "My daughter is getting married," I said. There was a pause. "Congratulations," he said. "Thank you." Neither of us said anything else about it. I also, quietly, called the property management company I use for the 4 units I don't self-manage. I asked them about adding an additional layer of documentation, keeping records thorough, making sure everything was clean and clearly in my name. They thought it was routine. It was routine. I was just being thorough, I told myself. That's all? He asked a third time in April. This time it was different. He and I were alone. Nora was at her friend's place in Penticton for the weekend, and he'd stopped by to drop off a box of things she'd left at his apartment. I made coffee. We sat. And he started talking about estate planning. He said he'd been doing some reading. He said he was aware that my husband had passed, that the properties were ultimately going to come to Nora eventually, and that it might be worth thinking now about the most tax-efficient way to structure that. He mentioned something about holding companies. He mentioned a specific kind of trust arrangement. He had clearly done research. I set my coffee cup down on the table and I looked at him directly and I said, "Callum, I have lawyers and accountants who handle these things. I don't discuss the specifics with anyone outside that circle." Something moved behind his eyes. Fast. Almost invisible. Then the smile came back. "Of course," he said. "I just wanted to be helpful." "I know," I said. I walked him to the door myself. That evening, I called Nora and I started. Carefully. Gently. Trying to raise my concerns. I didn't want to say too much. I didn't want to put her in a position where she felt she had to choose sides before I had anything concrete. I said I'd noticed Callum seemed very interested in the financial side of things. I said I wanted to make sure she was comfortable with that. She got quiet. "I know he asks a lot of questions, Mom," she said finally. "He's just curious. He works in finance. I know, sweetheart. He loves me. I know he does." "I believe you believe that," I said, very carefully. She was quiet again for a long time. Then she said, "Can we not do this right now?" "Of course," I said. "I love you. That's all this is." We hung up and I sat with the feeling of having said too little too late, or too much too soon. The impossible mathematics of being a mother trying to protect someone who doesn't want protecting yet. In May, I hired someone. My friend Glynis. We've known each other since our children were in kindergarten together. She'd been through her own version of something like this with her son-in-law a decade ago. Gave me the name of a woman who did background checks and due diligence work for private clients. Discreet, professional, used by several law firms in the interior. I felt strange making the call. I sat in my car in the parking lot of the Save on Pandassi Street for 20 minutes before I actually dialed. What she found took 3 weeks, and it was not what I expected. Callum's small financial consulting firm existed on paper. It had a registered address, a shared office space in downtown Kelowna, and a website that was just professional enough to look real. But it had no verifiable clients, no history of filed business taxes under its name, and a registered agent that turned out to be a numbered company with an address in another province. There had been a complaint filed against him 4 years earlier in Alberta. A woman, in her late 50s, recently widowed, had alleged that he had misrepresented his professional credentials in the context of what she described as a romantic relationship. The complaint had not gone to any formal proceeding. It had been settled privately. The details were not available to me, but the pattern was. I sat in my kitchen with that report on the table in front of me, and I felt two things at once. The first was a cold, clarifying anger, the kind that doesn't heat you up. It just makes everything very still and very clear. The second was grief, not for myself. For my daughter, who had spent 8 months loving someone who was not real. I did not call Nora right away. I thought carefully about what to do. I thought about calling the police, but I hadn't been defrauded of anything. Not yet. I thought about confronting Callum directly, but I knew that would only send him somewhere else to find another widow with property and daughters who wanted to believe. I called my lawyer, a woman I trust completely, who had handled Terrence's estate and the property restructuring afterward. She was quiet for a moment after I explained everything. "Has he asked you to sign anything?" she said. "No." "Has he attempted to be added to anything? Accounts, titles, anything?" "Not yet." "Then your exposure right now is emotional," she said, "which is significant. But legally, what we need to do is make sure it stays that way." She advised me to document everything. She advised me to speak to Nora, but carefully, with the report in hand, not as a mother's gut feeling, but as evidence. She said if I wanted her present for that conversation, she would be. I decided to do it myself. The wedding was booked for the last Saturday in June. It was going to be a small ceremony. 40 people, a vineyard outside of West Kelowna that Nora had loved since her friend got married there 3 years ago. Nora had been planning it mostly herself, which she'd wanted to do, and she'd been happy doing it. And every time I helped her with something, addressing envelopes, tasting menus, helping her find something of Terrence's to carry with her, I had to hold two things in my mind at once: the joy of watching my daughter prepare for a wedding and the knowledge of what I knew about the man she was marrying. I called her the Thursday before. I told her I needed to come and see her in person. She could hear something in my voice. "Mom," she said. "What is it?" "I need to show you something," I said. "I need to show you to you myself in person. Can I come tomorrow?" She said yes. I drove down to her apartment in the morning with the report in a plain manila folder and 2 takeout coffees from the place she loves on Ellis Street. And when she opened the door, she looked at me and she already knew it was serious. She let me in. We sat at her kitchen table. I put the coffees down and I put the folder on the table and I said, "Before I show you this, I want you to know that I love you more than anything. I want you to know that I have been sitting with this for weeks because I did not want to hurt you. And I want you to know that you do not have to say anything right now, not a single thing, until you're ready." She opened the folder. She read for a long time. I watched her face. I did not say anything. When she finished, she closed the folder and she put her hands flat on the table and she didn't look at me. She looked at the wall. She stayed that way for maybe 2 full minutes. Then she said, "How long have you known?" "The report came 5 days ago," I said, "but I've been worried for months. Why didn't you tell me sooner?" "Because I didn't have anything to show you except a feeling," I said, "and I knew a feeling wasn't enough." She nodded slowly. She still wasn't looking at me. "I don't know what to do," she said. "You don't have to know right now," I said. "The wedding is in 2 days. I know." She cried then, hard, the kind of crying that doesn't have any vanity in it, just pure grief and confusion and the shock of having to rearrange your understanding of something you thought was real. I moved around the table and I held her and I didn't say anything comforting and useless. I just held her. She asked me to stay the night. I did. She asked me to be there when she talked to him. I was. We called him that evening and asked him to come over. Nora was quiet on the phone. She has her father's ability to hide what she's feeling when she needs to, and Callum must not have heard anything alarming because he came, easy and unhurried, carrying a bottle of wine. She let him in. I was sitting in the living room. He saw me and the easy look on his face shifted just slightly, not much, but I saw it. "What's going on?" he said. Nora handed him the folder. He looked at it. He didn't open it immediately. He looked at it from us. "What is this?" he said. "Open it," Nora said. He said. "Open it," Nora said. He opened it. He read. His face went through several things in the space of a minute. Calculation, I think, more than anything. Not remorse. Calculation. Figuring out which version of this he could still walk back from. He tried the first version, confusion. He said the company had been going through a restructuring, that the website was out of date, that the numbers company was for legal protection, standard for small businesses, which is sometimes true, which is what made it so slick. Nora said, "Tell me about the woman in Edmonton." His face went still. "Tell me about the complaint she filed," Nora said. "That was a misunderstanding," he said. "I can explain that." "Then explain it," she said. He couldn't. Not in a way that held together. Not under Nora's quiet and relentless questions, the ones she kept asking calmly, without raising her voice, that simply did not allow him to slide away from the specific and into the vague. "My daughter," I thought, watching her. "My daughter." He left without the wine. After, Nora and I sat on our couch for a long time without talking. The lamp on her side table was on, and the room was dim and warm, and outside it was almost fully dark, the way June evenings here taper so slowly into night. "I have to call 40 people," she said eventually. "I'll help," I said. "I have to call the vineyard." "I'll help." "I feel so stupid," she said. "Don't," I said. He was designed to be convincing. That's the entire mechanism. She leaned her head against my shoulder. "You knew, though," she said. "You knew and I didn't want to listen." "You're not a principal," I said. "You don't spend 20 years watching people perform." She made a sound that was almost a laugh. Almost. She did call the 40 people. She did cancel the vineyard, which was gracious about it, the way that small Okanagan businesses so often are with each other. She cried sometimes while making the calls, and sometimes she was perfectly composed, and I stayed close and handed her tea and said nothing unless she asked me something. We filed a complaint with the BC Financial Services Authority about his fraudulent representation of his firm. My lawyer was in contact with the woman in Edmonton who had heard through her own channels that there had been a new potential victim, and who agreed, after some time and some courage on her part, to add her account to the formal record. Callum, last I heard, had moved back to wherever it was he'd actually come from. The investigation was ongoing. The vineyard held the date for a year, just in case. "Just in case you meet someone real," the owner said, and Nora laughed for the first time in days. "It has been almost a year now. Nora is okay. Not in the way that dismisses what happened, but genuinely okay. She is dating someone new. Slowly and carefully, a man who works for the city and who, at their third dinner, told her he thought it was too early to meet her family, and she said that was probably right. She called me the next morning to tell me the story, and she sounded like herself. I still manage my properties. The 3 on the south side of Kelowna are fully occupied. The one on Lakeshore needs a new furnace this winter. I have a good property management company and a lawyer I trust and an accountant who has known my name for 20 years. And none of that is remarkable or dramatic. It is just the quiet, consistent work of protecting what you and the people you loved built together. Terrence's photograph is on the sideboard in my kitchen. The one from the summer we bought the second property, before we knew we were building anything, before we knew what it would become. He is laughing in it. He almost always was. I look at it sometimes when I'm sitting at that table in the early morning with my first cup of coffee, before anything needs to be done yet, before the day has started asking things of me. I look at it and I think about what we built and who it is for. It is for Nora. It has always been for Nora, and no one with a practiced smile and questions about property lines will ever change that.